Hello and welcome. My name is James. This is the first episode in a series documenting the importance of Florida's music history. Who better to start with than Mr. Nasty Ronnie Galletti from the band Nasty Savage? How you doing?
Hey, what's up, guys? Good to
Thank you.
be back, man. You guys are doing really good. I'm seeing that you're dedicated, and that's a great thing, man.
Nice. Thank you for taking the time today. Means a lot. So, we're going to start all the way at the beginning. Tell us about growing up in Brandon.
Oh, man. Growing up in Brandon, I started here in about fourth grade, moved from New York. And actually, I went to the school, Limona, which is in Brandon. And it was a round school, the only round school in Florida, I thought, and where all the classrooms were connected in a big circle, and they could open them up to make it one giant, like a donut or something. But so I went there, and then when I was living at my aunt's house while our house was being built, and when our house got built, we moved to this other part of Brandon, South Brandon, and I just happened to go to another school, Kingswood Elementary, and it was the other round school in Brandon, I think in Florida. And so I went to both round schools. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Nice.
And growing up, I was into drawing and stuff like that. But I ended up getting a motorcycle, a dirt bike, a Yamaha 80, and then I got an XR 75 Honda and started riding motorcycles a lot with my friends, and just did all the crazy stuff that kids did back then.
So, what were some of your earliest influences, and what really started the flame for music for you?
It had to be like AC/DC, Bon Scott, Ronnie Van Zant was a big inspiration from Leonard Skinner. They were just so real and so Florida, just so southern, and they just didn't care, and I just liked the reality of Leonard Skinner. Ronnie Van Zant was like a badass dude. On stage, he didn't wear shoes, just really. But they were Florida boys. I thought that was really cool. Then, of course, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden. Actually, before I was a Nasty Savage, we took a trip, me and two other guys, to Atlanta to the Fox Theater to see Iron Maiden on the Killers tour, and they opened up for Judas Priest on their it was Point of Entry tour, and Whitesnake actually played as well. So that was really cool. And then I was really inspired or influenced by Wendy O. Williams from the Plasmatics. Really, really just over the top stage show, and just her anti-authority and anti-everything. A woman with power and brains that kicked ass. I really like that.
Yeah, she's awesome. It's funny because we were talking about Wendy O. Williams when we met, and like a week later, we found a Plasmatic album at a thrift store, which was like insane luck that you never come across that stuff in the public.
Yeah, and if you ever saw their albums, the design, the photos, the imagery, it was always crazy, wild, over the top, and always impactful. And my earlier inspirations were people like Elvis Presley or even the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and I think the Doors, Jim Morrison. Break on through to the other side. It's like stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was really impactful to me. And just working hard for something and always maintaining their drive and determination, and winners who win, leaders who lead. Always people like that have always been. And then professional wrestling, is a big thing. And Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, he just put a big influence on me about the common man, the power of the people. And it didn't matter what color you are, where you're from, it was the coming together, the son of a plumber, that the people's champion, all that together, uh, created, I guess, Nasty Ronnie. And when I stepped on the stage,
Yeah, that's perfect. That actually leads in perfectly into the next question, which is what came first for you, heavy metal or pro wrestling?
pro wrestling, because, I was doing a podcast the other day, and I was saying, man, I never was a Kiss. I never was into Kiss and stuff. I kind of missed all that. Um, I really wasn't into heavy metal until the early 80s, right? 1981 or so, when the new wave British heavy metal started coming in. I think my first album ever was Styx Grand Illusion that I actually bought. And then I bought Leonard Skinner, One for the Road, or the double live album. And I just thought that was so cool. And then from there, I just started collecting records. And I'd try to find the most obscure metal records. And we'd go to record conventions and record stores in every town and city. And, bands like Stray Dog, Ursa Major. Man, there's so many off the wall bands. Legs Diamond. We used to go and find these album covers and shit. I remember I was in Kmart one time and I saw the first Van Halen album. I'm like, damn, this looks cool. And right next to it was, I think, Motorhead Overkill. And, I was like, damn. But I started buying. A friend of mine had a record store in Tampa, and his name was Fred McKendry. And he used to get all the import records. Every week he'd get them and call everybody and go, okay, these are coming in. Do you want me to get you one? And it was like, the first Iron Maidens, the 7 inches, the 12-inch singles, their albums, the import. It was always imported, colored vinyl, and, Holocaust, Diamond Head, Venom. We'd hear these bands for the first time or these compilation albums. We go, oh, man, this is cool. And, Angel Witch, bands like that. And, the Metallica, it just really inspired me to keep digging deeper and deeper in the rock and roll and heavy metal. But when every month we'd get these, the imported records from his record store, and it was just killer. It's just, we never knew what we were getting until we started listening to it.
It really seems like that was like the Wild West. Like anything went. There was like, now you have free exposure to anything, but I feel like then it meant a lot more to know.
Well, yeah, because you weren't hearing it on your cell phone or internet or anything. You were going and buying a record, and you were putting it on, unless you had a cassette tape, or a demo tapes, and you're actually putting it on. And when you listen to it, you got to look at the sleeve and read everything and all the pictures. And, I used to ride around with a friend of mine, Bobby Gibbs, and he would make these sample tapes of all these different bands, and we'd ride around in his Trans Am and, just jam out. And his brother, this was like the early 80s, way before Nasty Savage. His brother was going to West Point, and that was up north New York. And he would come back, when he got up, when he'd get a break, he'd get away, come home, and he'd bring these live tapes of this band that he would see in this bar. And he said, this band is badass, man. And the dude raps to people. He talks to them and between songs, and they're just killer. And it was Twisted Sister. And, so he used to see them in a bar, and he would come home and rave about them. We'd listen to these things. I remember when their first 7-inch single came out, we definitely grabbed it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And another thing that like mattered back then that you really don't see anymore, that you mentioned, compilation albums was a major source of discovering new music. And now I don't think any major label makes compilation records anymore.
Yeah, I used to love that, man, because I listened to every song, and I'd just see which ones were my favorite, and you're uncovering like a jewel on a platter, and there's all kinds of bands. But if you didn't listen to every single one, like that band's Trespass, I think they had a song called Storm Child. We used to play that, heavy metal for mothers. There's all kinds of cool compilations, but we used to find extreme bands and want to play their music. But it was also cool to start going back into the 70s of these heavy bands back then that were playing heavy metal stuff that also inspired us.
Pre-Nasty Savage, early 80s. What is like the snapshot of what the metal scene looked like? Like, were zines being made at that time?
Yeah,
Or
there really wasn't anything. There was Savatage were playing, but they were Avatar, so they just started. And a guy named Dan Johnson just was a visionary who found Savatage and created Par Records. And I think he was the catalyst of the heavy metal movement, because he found this band Savatage or Avatar, and then they changed their name to Savatage, but they put out a single. There was another band, a bar band called Argus, and they ended up putting out a single, a 12-inch, with I think an EP with some songs on it. And but we used to go see those guys, and we'd get to know the bands, and we'd get Argus would start playing some of the new wave British heavy metal stuff that we were giving them, and they would play like Storm Child too, and they played a bunch of Angel Witch, and because they thought it was cool, because when they did that, they created a following quicker, because we all loved to hear those songs.
Yeah.
So there was those bands. There was another band called Vengeance, and they were just another kind of local backyard bar band, but they were playing heavy stuff too, and that was pretty much it, and so I never really thought about being a singer in a band or anything, but the more and more I started liking heavy metal and British metal and Venom, I said, man, if they can do it, hell, I'm not afraid to do it, so I started jamming with some guys in a band called Chronic Dogs, and that's all it was practice jamming, and so that didn't last long. And then I was just not doing much, and but there was no fanzines, there was no metal media, nothing. It was that guy Fred McKendry had a record store, and he catered to heavy metal. And there's another place in St. Pete we used to go to. I remember we'd pull up to the store in St. Pete, and my friend Devanoy, he's got probably 10,000 records now, or more. He has the Soundhouse tapes, Iron Maiden Soundhouse tapes, really rare, and he had it back then. But we'd pull up to the record store and run, and we'd try to beat each other to get to where the 7-inch 45s were, all the new records. It was like, oh man, the first time I went, I go, where are they at? He goes, oh, they're into the left, and I went into the left, but they were really to the right. He was on them before I was, so it was always that competition. It made it fun, exciting. And then we trade records and borrow each other's.
Very early, like you said, you were in a band, Pre-Nasty Savage, looking for other people to join or start this new band. What was that process like?
Well, so what I was doing is I had a rock box, and then I had another rock box in my room. And I would play like Iron Maiden on one rock box, and on the other rock box, I would put a blank cassette in and hit record, and I would sing over the music where Paul Deanna was singing. I throw my lyrics in, Rothschild or something. And one of my friends came over one day. He goes, dude, what is that? I go, oh, I'm just messing around. He goes, dude, I know a band who's looking for a singer. They're called Nightmare. I go, oh, wow, really? So I go, that's kind of cool. So he called him up. He said, man, I got a guy who's going to try out for you guys. And that was Ben, Fred, and Craig Huffman. And they had a female singer, and they were getting rid of her. So I was actually with my girlfriend at the time, is my wife now, some 40-something years ago. Wow. And I said, we were driving in her Pinto, and I was just coming back from a place called Sensuous Sound System on Bush, getting a turntable. And I said, hey, stop over here. I want to try for this band. She goes, what? I go, yeah, just come back in about a half hour. So I went in there. I was nervous. I just sang like 2 Iron Maiden songs 3 times each or something, or a couple of times each. And that was it. I said, okay, bye. And I left. And I never heard back from those guys. So I was like, wow, they never called me back. So like, I've never not made any team I tried out for. So I'm like, damn, maybe I didn't make this one. But I was at a keg party about a week later or 2 weeks, and I saw those guys. I said, oh, that's them guys, man, a Nightmare. So I walked right up to them and I said, do you guys want me to be your singer or not? And they said, yeah, we do. So I said, all right, I'll be over Monday with a game plan. And that's what I did. I went over there Monday and I had a game plan because that's why the other band didn't do anything. There was no game plan. You got to have a game plan, man. In anything you do in life, you got to have a start and a finish, but then the middle tells the whole story. So it's like telling stories or setting goals or to achieve. So anyway, I went over there and it was like a band house and all these people were in there, besides the band guys. I said, okay, everybody out. And they're looking at me like, who is this guy? I said, no, everybody out right now except the band. Okay, please. So I said, all right, sit down. They all sat down. I said, this is the name of the band. It's Nasty Savage. I'm Nasty Ronnie, the wildest singer ever. I said, and we're going to put our money together. We're going to create some of our own original songs. Are you with me? Are you with me? We're going to create our own songs. And we're going to come up with a demo tape called Wage of Mayhem. And I think I thought most of it on the way there. I was thinking all this shit. I said, Wage of Mayhem. I said, within 1 year, we're only going to put 4 songs on it. We're not going to put 100 songs, 10 songs. We're going to just go 4 songs. So record companies likes it. It doesn't take a lot of songs. They're going to know. So I said, within 1 year, our goal is going to be to have a record deal, be touring and getting fan mail from all over the world. I said, is everybody in? Is everybody in? And they said, yeah, cool, bro. And that's what happened, man. All that shit within 1 year, it happened.
Wow. All right. That's awesome. So you make Wages of Mayhem in 1984. You put the 4 songs on it. What was the recording process for that demo?
It was really cool because right after that, Fred, there were some changes that happened before the demo. But what happened is we started playing gigs and we started building this reputation of the band you've got to see because they do crazy shit. And then, when you're young, you want that. You want somebody that like breaks shit, tears stuff up, anti-authority, tells the cops off or whatever. Our first show we created in this neighborhood, Tom Hepner's house. His parents were out of town, and we went to a job site and stole a bunch of wood, and we built a stage in his side yard and a job site in the middle of the afternoon in Fred's van. And we set up this stage. We played, and of course the cops came probably within about 4 or 5 songs. The cops were already there. So I said, all right, hold on. And right when the cops came up, we stopped playing. And then right when they came to the front of the stage, we played Judas Priest, Breaking the Law. So it was like, everybody goes, man, those guys have balls, dude. You gotta, oh my God. And they said, okay, shut it down. We said, yes, sir. They left and we started playing again. And the people were like, oh, this is killer. And the cops came again and then they totally shut us down. But it was that impact that we wanted to do. Actually, one of my friends was there on a Harley Davidson, and I got on the Harley, is out by the street, and I rode it right through the crowd to the front of the stage, and it moved everybody out of the way. I got on stage. So it all happened like that. And we built up a reputation of the band you don't want to miss because, hell, they're Brandon. It's heavy metal. It's new. It's fresh. And then Fred and Ben would just write all kinds of songs all the time. They're always writing. And we probably had 10 or 12 original songs, So we picked out of a lot of those songs, uh, our favorites. But what happened is Craig was having some problems with his life, and he was just having some issues, drinking or whatever, just not showing up or not just doing dumb stuff, I guess. And at the same time, we met Curtis Beeson, who had trucks and PA equipment. His dad had a moving company and all this stuff, and they were like, really set. And he was a killer drummer. And then at the same time, I said, we need to get another guitarist. And I heard about David Austin, and I called him. I said, Dave, man, you got to. Oh, he goes, hell yeah. So now David and Curtis were both in the band. And that's when we really dialed in the demo tape songs of Witch's Sabbath, Savage Desire, Unchained Angel, and the song Triple X. Before the demo, I was already starting to get press and media just from pictures and live reviews. And because I knew if I was in a band, if I set that goal, remember we talked about earlier about the first band I was in didn't have a goal. We didn't have a leader. You have to be a leader. Those guys, Fred and Dave and Ben and Curtis, they wrote the music, and where I didn't have anything to do with that. Those guys created the music kind of, with my inspiration or influence, but they did it, man. Those guys created that fucking music. So my job was to promote the hell out of it and be the guy on stage. So that's what I did. And I would even write to like magazines and go, man, I just saw this. I saw this band last night. I couldn't get in because it was sold out, but I snuck in the back door, and this band, everyone was going to see this band. It's packed. The band is Nasty Savage. And dude, he goes, dude, they are fucking badass. And the people love them. And here's some pictures I took, and I'd sign it Sue Billings or something. And that shit would get printed. I'm like, damn, there are no rules. There are no rules in marketing, people. So I'm like, damn. So that was working, and people would read that and they go, damn. And then I'd make sure that I'd go to the Brandon News because we started getting fan mail from all over the world. And I started getting in magazines before the demo even. So then when the demo came out, I just started sending hundreds and hundreds of tapes out. I just invest.
Yeah, it really did seem like from day one, like the first show, everyone was a fan and everyone was like in check that this was going to be the thing. Going back a little bit, what was like the second that you started to see people noticing, like the second you saw the reception?
Well, I just looked into the eyes of Fred Dregerson, David Austin, Curtis Beeson, and Ben Meyer. That was our nucleus. That was our inner circle. That was the creative team, these musicians who believed. We were all in. A lot of bands, we used to practice like 5 times a week, man. We'd practice every night. We were like brothers. And you have to be, because some people get in the band for the wrong reasons. They get in the band because they want to be a cool rock star. They want to impress girls, and they have to bring their girlfriend every freaking where, and he has to sit right next to her and light cigarettes or whatever. We didn't have that shit. I mean, we really acted like a business. So when I knew that everybody was on the same page and the music that they were creating, and Fred Dregerson was like the nucleus to me, like Steve Harris. We'd sit in his van after practice and just talk about philosophy or just crazy shit, lyrics and, astronomy or whatever it may be, psychology, and he'd talk about music theory. It was way over my head. But his creativeness inspired me to be creative. So we didn't really care about what anybody else thought, because we knew we were on track to do what we wanted to do. And any time in life that you try to model something because Joe Blow likes it or Jim Beam likes it, something's going to happen. Like there were people that say, man, you guys need to sound like this band. We sounded like us because when I started, we did the bar scene for a while, playing like 4 sets. of cover songs and all that shit. And I'm like, dude, I don't like to sing like Rob Halford, or I'm not singing like this guy and try to do that. I said, let's just do our own music, because then we can do whatever the hell we want to do. And that's what we did. And then we go in and we play one set, and that's it. We don't have to play 4 sets. So we became a show band pretty right off the bat. But it's still like politics, it's still like kissing babies and shaking hands. We're creating following. But you don't just create it because you think you're good or because you go and kick ass. You got to reach out to the people and make them a part of what you're doing. And that's one thing we did. I mean, we had this one boy back then that had a VHS recorder. I forget his name, but their parents were really rich. No one had that back then. So I would get them to come to every one of our shows and film. And then like the next day we'd go to their house and watch it. It was so cool that we were like, damn, that's the show we just played. And, it's like, it was every person we could reach, touch, consider, or just inspire or influence to be a part of the Nasty Savage wage of mayhem. We had to create that, man. And that's when the fanzine started, the tape trading started. Yeah. It all started through the 80s because of that British metal, the live shows. And it wasn't just Nasty Savage, man. It was heavy metal across the world coming together. People like you guys, but all they had is fanzines, and they cut and paste, and but they believe there's radio stations in every college that would have a metal show. So with every college station, I get one of them computer printouts of all the different college stations. And as I went along, I would like, okay, today I'll do 10 radio stations. I'll do all these magazines. I'd go to the post office with big bags full of shit that I'd mail. I'd always be a Kinko's copying. We play with this guerrilla marketing, putting it up on putting flyers up on poles and, doing all that stuff. And so we're getting the word out, and that's what it took, because, you just had to. So, I mean, so we were promoting and doing that kind of stuff. But the guys in the newspaper really helped me out, because they're professional photographers. You have professional photography of great content that tell a story by itself. One story is worth 1,000 words. So all of a sudden, everybody was anticipating the demo and then anticipating the first album because of the imagery that we used to promote, brand, and market. And we started getting a lot of fan mail. And the demos, we put out, they'd review the demo, and then they say, buy your copy, send it here. And man, we'd get orders all the time. It was all coming to my house at the time. And my mom, I called my mom from work. I said, Mom, did we get any? Oh, yeah, you got about 10 letters today, and you got a couple of big envelopes. And she said, oh, here's a letter from Metal Blade Records. I go, Metal Blade Records? I go, oh, shit, open it up. And my mom actually read me the letter from Brian Slagle while I was at work.
Wow.
And it said, hey, man, you guys are creating quite a stir down in Florida and all over the place. And someone from San Antonio, a radio station, sent me a reel-to-reel tape of your demo, and we want to put you on Metal Massacre 6 at the song Triple X, and we'd like to do a whole album, follow it up with a whole album. And we were like, oh my God, man, it really is happening. So that's how that happened. We had to grind it out, man.
Yeah, a lot of that draw was the stage show and the stage presence. The CRTs, breaking things. Was the CRTs there from the beginning?
The TV sets were just, from the first show in the Tom Hepner side yard. There was a TV set there, but I smashed it with a sledgehammer. And, I was inspired by Wendy O. Williams. She used to blow up TVs. She used to chainsaw guitars in half. She used to smash TV sets with sledgehammers. And I just thought, man, that's kind of cool, because we'd get all this information from a TV, and it kind of would try to brainwash us. It still does. All media does now. You got whatever, this news, that news, fake news, they call it. But, it's always been a tool for someone's to try to inspiration or to try to push some brainwashability on you. And I just thought, hey, man, I'm going to use that like Wendio did as a tool. And I just became, it was kind of a gimmick that I created. But what happens is the music the music is what did it.
Yeah.
That hypnotic fucking music that Ben, David, Fred, and Curtis created, that driving beat of the bass, of the drums, and the killer guitars and the leads. It was just hypnotic to me. Ben even wrote a song called Hypnotic Trance later on, but that's what drove me to do what I do. It was the music, that the music. And what am I going to do? I mean, I didn't know. I said, dude, I'm just going to do my thing. And it just happened to be television sets,
Yeah.
And, people they'd freak out on that shit.
No, you still do the television sets. How do you come across those? Because they're a dime a dozen nowadays.
Well, they're not even a dime a dozen. They're probably like one in 1,000. They're hard to find. But any Nasty Savage fan, I think when you're driving down the road and you're on some back road, or you always see couches on the side of the road. Every once in a while, you see a TV set, and I want them to say, "Oh, Nasty Ronnie probably like that." So
Yeah.
sometimes they pull over and grab them, and then they say, "Hey, man, I got a TV for you next show." I go, "All right, cool, man, bring it over. I'll meet you, or just bring it to the show, and you can get in free." So the fans bring them. Now when we go on tour, I have the promoters get them, and I tell them, because usually we're booked. If they book us, they're booking us 3, 4, 6 months out. So I start telling them, then you better start finding those TV sets because they're not easy to find. Oh no, we'll get them. And 10 days before the show, they still don't have one. That makes the show for me. I mean, that's what I really enjoy, because I like to mess with it the whole time. But without that, I don't have that stage prop that I really like. And as you get older, you need more stage props. But yeah, they're harder to find. I used to go to TV stores and go, "Hey man, you got any old TV sets? I'm doing a project for college or school." And they go, "Yeah, I've got a couple." I go, "Well, let me tell you what I really do with them." And they go, "Oh, okay, cool, man. I'll start saving them for you." So I'd have different outlets. But it's pretty cool when people look out for you on something like that.
Yeah. I'm sure you thought about moving to flat screens before.
Well,
Changing to that.
I've had a couple of flat screens, but they're not near as fun. They're not
Yeah,
near.
they don't break as good. They don't get the dust.
Well, we just played Alcatraz Fest in Belgium. It was like a couple months ago, and there's 28,000 people there, and they had 2 giant stages. We played on a smaller stage, but we played a Saturday night at 9 p.m. and there's probably 800 or 1,000 people in this big giant tent that we played called La Morgue, the La Morgue stage it was. And Obituary played after us on the big stage, so they were hanging out with us before we went on stage, and Trevor was on the side of the stage filming almost 90% of the show. But I kept telling those guys, "Hey man, make sure you get me TVs. Who's in charge of the stage? I need TVs." And they go, "Oh, yes, we have them." So I get there, and they go, "Do you want them to bring the TVs to you in the dressing room?" I go, No, just put them on the stage." So they bring this cart by, and I look, and they're like monitor flat screen shit. I'm like, "What is this?" I go, "I told you I needed old school TVs, man." So I had like 4 or 5 different sizes of these flat screens, and had to make the most of it. I did.
Yeah.
It's an old wrestling thing. If you could wrestle a chair and get over, you're damn good at performing. So I still was able to work with it. But things like that, I always learned being a publisher, a producer, that it's about communication. If something was wrong, I can't say, "Oh, you fucked up, man." I have to go, "Well, I guess I didn't communicate effectively enough." So I just got to be more of a communicator. Send them pictures, diagrams, and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's important to have that.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were the first metal band to record at Morrisound, right?
Well, Sabotage did first.
Sabotage, okay.
And Fred McKendry, the guy from the record store, he was kind of friends with Dan Johnson. And I met Dan Johnson, and I always thought, wow, we'll get signed by him, but he never wanted to sign us because we weren't as good as Sabotage. Sabotage is that real polished metal and all that, and it was always a knock against us that we weren't good enough. You know, we're just all show and no go. You know, and I go whatever. So once they did it there and we got signed, we thought, well, that's the place we need to go is Morrisound Recording. So that's how that happened. And Metal Blade gave us a budget, and Fred and Dave really produced the whole damn album along with Jim Morris. And at the time, Scott Burns was an assistant there. He would like change the tapes or get coffee and make coffee and, you know, just be right there with anything Jim needed. But Scott was taking it. I could just tell this dude was a sponge. And a lot of times you go in the studio and you go, where's the guy? Where's that assistant? Oh, he's not. He's somewhere doing something else. Scott was always right on the money. Everything. I could tell he was like, man, Scott's a good guy. Because, you know, when you're working in the studio, you really got to achieve your goals to get things done in production. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you need a tape, you need this. He was always right there for Jim, always learning. And then he became, you know, a legendary death metal producer. And it was really cool to see that happen too. And then all of a sudden, once our album came out, Brian Slagle came to Florida just for the mix. He never even heard one song. And he was all happy with everything. And all of a sudden, bands were coming to Florida to record Sepultura, Creator, Agent Steel. I mean, so many other bands. And it was really cool because they liked the production we did, or it started becoming the heavy metal capital of Florida. It was Tampa Bay with Brandon. We created that. We really created that.
Some of the most infamous of the very early Nasty Savage shows, World War III, the show with Whiplash and Slayer were some of the biggest ones that I've seen that a lot of people bring up. Can you tell me a little bit about those?
Well, the one in Slayer was early. I mean, I think our album just came out, and we were getting a lot of fan mail and, you know, on the underground tape trading with in New York, and it was Lemoore in Brooklyn. We played at CBGB's actually the night before, and I got a telegram. I've never had a telegram in my life, and the guy from Millie was the owner of CBGB's. I mean, I didn't even take one picture in the CBGB's either. You know, here we are, we're just kind of starstruck or just so beat from being on the road that we didn't even think about it. Anyway, he sends me, he goes, "Hey, man, are you Ron?" I go, "Yes." He goes, "I've got a telegram for you. It's from Wendy O. Williams." So Wendy O. Williams sends me a telegram saying, "Sorry, I can't be at CBGB's tonight, but I will see you tomorrow at Lemoore. I'm in LA with Lemmy from Motorhead doing something." I said, "All right." So, I mean, CBGB's was killer, you know, just playing there. And then going to Lemoore, I remember we went in and Slayer was in the middle of doing a sound check, and we're like, "Oh my God, that shit's heavy." We're like right up front. I'm like, "Dude, this is heavy as shit." And now we're going to open up for them. And Hallows Eve was with us. And then we played, and then Slayer. So after we played, I was all cut up and bruised, whatever, and glass and blood. So I went in the Slayer's dressing room and I said, "Hey guys, how are you? Can I take a shower?" Because ours didn't have a shower. And they go, "Hell no, you can't take a shower in our dressing room. We're from California. You're only from Florida." You know, that's how I was thinking, like we're nobody. And we really were nobody. So I waited till they went on stage, and then I went into their dressing room, took a shower. And then I was hanging out in there, and then Wendy O. Williams comes in, and we hung out the whole time Slayer was playing. And then Slayer got done and comes in, and I'm sitting in the main chair in their dressing room, drinking probably their beer and everything else. And they go, "Wendy O. Williams, oh my God." She goes, "Hey man," she goes, "but I'm here to see Nasty Ronnie." She goes, "Come on, Nasty, let's go." And we left. So that was that. But the show was mayhem. And I listened to a live tape of that. Somebody sent it to me. And when I look back, I go, man, I didn't even know what I was doing back then. The music was powerful and all that, but you just keep learning how to communicate with the crowd and how to really tell your story to keep the crowd involved or just to communicate reception, feedback. It's a challenge. It really is a challenge to gain the crowd, to win them over, to put them in your palm of your hand and control them. They wouldn't be controlled if they didn't respect what you're doing, if they didn't appreciate what you're doing, and if they didn't buy into what you're doing. So all that has to be attained to get them to follow along. Like now, I think I've got I think I got it down more, but it's always a learning process. What do I do to make it better? Like performing arts, man. It's like acting. It's like bringing it all together. So World War III was another thing. We get in this tour bus that Adrian, our manager, got us. It was a 1960 something tour bus, Greyhound, and we go to Canada. And we played some shows in New York too on the way. I think that was that L'Amour show with Slayer. So we go to World War III and we meet Tom Warrior, Celtic Frost. We meet the guys in Possess, Voivod are big fans of ours.
Wow.
And we start meeting these bands that we've been pen pals with, and it was just really cool. So there we are, like the metal battle. It's like we're from Florida. It's time to show who the hell we were, and we did. Man, we played first, and we set the tone. And it's just that's what you have to do, man. I say it all the time, but in the old days, Elvis Presley, Little Richard, Johnny Cash, and Jerry Lee Lewis sometimes would play on the same stage touring the South or something, and Little Richard would get off the stage and say, "Top that" to Jerry Lee, and Jerry Lee would go, "Okay," and he'd go out there and set his piano on fire at the end of the show. So when you have the stage, take it. So that was always my motto. And the guys, same thing, man. They knew they'd thrash their ass off, play, just play with passion, and just let the music take you where you want to go. That's what we did every show. And we let that speak for ourselves, It always did the talking.
Now, in the early days, post the demo, when did you start to like notice fans and familiar faces and people around starting bands because of Nasty Savage, like Mantis and Executioner?
That wasn't until later in the 80s, because we just keep playing, and every time we play, we'd see these guys dressed up pretty cool, and more metal dudes, and more, not a lot of chicks back then, but more and more metal chicks. And then you'd see four dudes that hung out, and they're like, I go, man, I bet those guys are in a band. And then they were saying, yeah, we came up from Carolinas. Here we are in Tampa because we want to see what metal's about. And we want to see. So now we noticed that people were traveling from out of state, or they come from Miami, 5 guys in a car. And we just started seeing more and more activity. And I thought that was really cool because we were gaining the following that we were looking for. And when you notice that, you give them something special. Say, hey, man, I want to give you a T-shirt. Hey, I appreciate what you're doing. Come back and I want to introduce you to the guys. Or here's our demo, because they're going to go back and be soldiers for you. They're going to promote for you. They're going to feel a connection. So I always try to do goodwill to not only mankind but to the metal scene. You have to be a diplomatic kind of person. And you have to be a giver, and you can't go around being Nasty Ronnie 24/7, the guy on stage. You have to have the business part of it. You have to be a communicator that knows how to communicate effectively. So I remember all of a sudden this band was here and there was another band. And then when we play, they go, hey, these bands want to open up. I say, I don't care. Let them, bring them. So bands started opening up for us. And I would always come like 10 minutes before we played. I'd roll in, get on stage, and do my thing because I never liked to hang out because it was always loud. And when you're a singer, you can't really talk loud. You got to kind of save your voice and all that shit. So I would just roll in and, where maybe other guys would sit there and watch every band. I never did. But I was always open to whatever bands, bring them. Yeah, let's do it. We started our own fanzine, Nasty Savage Wage of Mayhem fanzine. And I started help promoting local bands, and like Siren started playing more out in that time. And Ed Aborn became friends. I gave him all my contacts. I said, dude, here, start sending your demo to these places. I gave him like 5 pages of contacts, and he did. I started seeing Siren come up and in the same fanzines. I thought that was cool because it was helping Siren, but it was really helping the scene that we were part of. And it created more people. Like when they saw Siren, they go, another band from Brandon. Oh, another band from Tampa, and another. All of a sudden, later in the 80s, that's when bands like Executioner and, Death or Mantis started coming around, and Atheists before they were Atheists. And, we saw that stuff coming. But that was well after we already had our first album, probably working on our second Indulgence album. And then that stuff started. And, but I could look back at some pictures because I used to take pictures on stage of the crowd. And I could see like Trevor from Obituary in the pictures before he was in a band. And, so it was really cool that we did. I say we were that first wave of metal. And I think because people saw what we did, it was extreme. It was crazy. It was impactful. Now these guys say, well, hell, if they can do it, we got Venom, we got these bands now. Let's do our brand. Let's do our thing. And here comes the second wave of metal in the late 80s. And all of a sudden, Obituary came out after Executioner. And all of a sudden, Atheist came out, and Morbid Angel was doing it. And, Death came along after Mantis. And I remember those guys came to our show at the London Victory Club with 2 guys that did a fanzine called Guillotine. And they put me on the cover of their first magazine, little magazine, fanzine. And they came to the show and they go, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, Chuck, Rick, and Cam. And these guys are from Orlando. And they just was thrashing like crazy the whole show right at my feet. Boom. Yeah. And it was like a concrete stage or something. And I remember Chuck had a big old lump on his forehead, and they were just into it, and it was cool. And then they said, we're getting a band going, and it's called Mantis. And they came to one of our practices, and they said, hey, can we play a song? We want to show you. And I said, sure. And all of a sudden they came up and started playing their stuff. And I was like, holy cow. I said, this is different, man. This is the next wave here before our eyes. The next thing you knew, that death metal and death, and they played with us at Ruby's Pub the eve of New Year's Evil and the Tape Traders, and it just went ballistic, man. It was like the right timing for the second wave. Monstrosity, man, so many bands, Brutality, and all these bands started coming out of the woodwork. So it was a really good time, and that's where I started seeing it.
In 1986, your sophomore album Indulgence is released. Is there any notable stories from recording that?
Well, they always say that Jim Morris will still say it. The Triple X with Locke and Luna in the studio. What really happened? The lights were out. We were just doing it by candlelight. They're all freaked out. Like, what are they doing? And they're making those crazy noises and shit. So that was funny. But Indulgence, what happened is we lost Fred. So Fred was gone. We got another bass player, Dezo. So Dezo, Fred was our nucleus. He wrote a lot of stuff. He wrote a lot of that first album. And so now Fred, as a leader, along with David, was pretty much leadership, the driving force of creativeness. And then Ben would write his stuff. But it was more, I think, Fred, he was gone. So now Dave took the lead with Ben, and then Dezo is just a bass player that came in. So, he couldn't take much of a lead. He had to follow, but he gave us his brand of bass playing, which I think cranked it up to another level as far as young, energetic. He wrote a song. He was in the heavy music. And at the same time, Deicide, Morbid Angel, Obituary, Death, they were out. And I was like, dude, we need to get heavier. I was like, because now Nasty Savage was fading and this new second wave was overtaking his death metal.
Mm-hmm.
It was more aggressive. It was extreme. It was like, so it's like, I was like, damn, okay, we got to do something. Otherwise, we're just going to fade away, but we don't want to change our beliefs. And that's what we felt too. So anyway, we're in competition now with these younger guys. And the second album, I think, got a little heavier with Dezo. And, it was a little heavier, faster. And it was, it was just it was the next level that we were doing. And it was kind of cool to see that progression happening.
Okay. So in 1988, Nasty Savage leaves for Europe for the first time. Tell me a little about like planning that and kind of the reaction of the band.
The European tour. Yeah, man, it was like Adrian Beeson, Curtis's dad, said, "Hey, man, there's a promoter wants you guys to play in Europe. 30 shows in Europe, and you're going to be headlining with Exhumer and Autumncraft, a British band and a German band." I said, "All right, let's go." By then, Dezo left the band. He was gone. His dad made him leave the band because he didn't like him being in a heavy metal band. So he left, and we acquired Chris Morehouse. And Chris was a great bass player, and he was the guy who was going to Europe with us. And we were all excited, and we went, and we went to England and hung out there for like 3 or 4 days before we got on the ferry and went across the North Sea and ended up in Denmark. Copenhagen, Denmark was our very first show. And we just blew them away. Every show was sold out, nuts, craziness. It was just, we couldn't believe it. And there was no television sets at any of those shows.
Yeah.
So they banned the TVs because they thought they were going to start a riot or something. So yeah, it was incredible to say, man, we're going to Europe. We're going to Europe, man. We're playing. It was crazy. So that was, and then we played the big shows in Poland too, behind the Iron Curtain.
Talk about because that was professionally filmed.
Yeah, they did that one the big show. It's actually called the Metal Battle, and man, that was just, we walked in that big arena and saw how big that backdrop was. We were like, oh my God. It was just crazy. The whole tour we're with the greatest fans in the world that came from all over the world to witness the band that they've been reading about and hearing. And now it was time for us to back up that stuff to show what we were made of.
Yeah, because Ben Meyer told my father years and years ago that when when the band got off the plane, that it was like the Beatles entering America for the first time.
It was probably something like that. Yeah. And it was just good to go into a foreign land and bringing people together for a love of music. And this was a love of heavy metal. And it didn't matter where you come from, what color you are, what you believe in, or anything but showing up and playing heavy metal music to fans who love it. That's the greatest thing you could do, man. It's anytime you can do that and walk into a foreign land and they know the songs, or they're educated fans. They really are smart, and it's just really cool.
So 89 Penetration Point would be the final Nasty Savage album for the original run. What was the feeling in the band at that point, either recording the album and after it?
I mean, we're still pretty gung ho because we got it. That was our first album with Rotten Records. So we signed with Rotten Records, and DRI was on that. That's who took us on that tour we did with Sick of It All, 60 shows in 65 days.
Yeah.
So we learned a lot on that tour, but we also had an album, Penetration Point, and so we acquired. Chris Morehouse was gone, so we acquired this other bass player. So now we're changing our style again, from Fred to Dezo to Chris. Now it's Richard Bateman, this monster bass player, dude. I mean, Richard changed the game. He got everybody to crank up their ability another notch because he was a badass bass player. And man, it was fun dealing with Richard. It was fun recording with Richard. Everything about Richard was awesome. And I think he helped us at a low point. We were having problems with management or business, touring. Richard came on the scene and was a good spark of energy. And it reflected in the music because when everybody was getting heavier and, all the death metal vocals and death metal, we turned it up to even more complexity, some more, complex music that was just like progressively twisted, where they'd give me these songs and I go, damn, I'm supposed to sing to this? Oh, shit. So it was really, it was challenging, but it was a good time. We were creating, and we didn't know it was going to be the last one, the first one. We just knew it was time to do what we do. And I think some of that people say some of our best music we ever created is definitely out there. David Austin's music and Ben's and Richard, everybody put their 2 cents in, and Curtis just drumming like crazy. And if you listen to these albums and Morris sound, when you're recording, the most important thing is the drums. Get the drum tracks, get the drum sound, that snare sound, get that snare sounding right. And man, when you hear those drums right, everything else falls into place. But if you pass the drums without making them sound great, later on you can't go back and make them sound great. There's only so much perfume you can put on a pig. So we dial that shit in, and I got to hand it to David and the guys who were there every single day. Where I was still writing lyrics and stuff, so sometimes I missed all the recording until I got the rhythm tracks. I'd go once in a while, but to me it was boring, because I'm really not the musician guy. I was more of the color guy. When you paint a picture, the guy who puts the painting does the color part, puts the color in there. So I really respect all the work that they did. And I was still writing lyrics. So I'd get the rhythm tracks. And then once they did the leads, then I knew that I had to sing where I was singing and all that stuff. So it was a big process, but I remember those times as being good times, and just everybody else did their stuff and I had to do mine. And it was really scary when everybody else went in and kicked ass and did their job, and then now it's my turn. Yeah. And those guys are all going to be there watching too. So it's there's a lot of pressure on you, to deliver, to be that, not the weakest link of the chain,
Going back to the DRI, Sick of It All, which was a weird bill. Nasty Savage, a thrash metal band, a crossover band, and a hardcore band. And the time when hardcore and heavy metal never really crossed over. Tell me about that tour.
Yeah, I mean, DRI is notorious for hardcore band for touring nonstop, and that's what they do. That's what they do. So we get on the label, and Spike saying, "Yeah, man, we want to take you guys on this tour." First, we went to California and played 3 shows with them before we did the other tour. So we did that, and that went over good. Then they said, we got this other tour, and so we agreed to do that. And Sick of It All, I didn't know anything about hardcore really much because we're in the metal world. And then I learned about Sick of It All and how popular they were in their hardcore circles of straight edge hardcore. And then now there's factions of different hardcore. And, we didn't even know this shit.
Mm-hmm.
So they are straight edge punks. And straight edge, they don't drink, they don't smoke. They're just in the hardcore and working in family, I guess. And it was cool because they had their crowd that were kind of different from DRI's hardcore crowd. And then we come in with long hair, thrash metal in the middle. And the first show we played was in Lawrence, Kansas. So we had to drive all the way to Lawrence, Kansas to play in this cool club. And when you walked out the door, you see this giant cornfield. It's just really crazy. We started seeing America, because we're in a band.
Mm-hmm.
And Curtis didn't do that tour. We were with a guy named Rob Proctor. He was in a band called Ass Suck from St. Pete. And he's a big, tall dude, about 6'6". And it was his band that we were in. So it was pretty challenging with that, with a different drummer, and he was a big old dude. But man, it was fun. We learned a lot. Tried to save money. Stayed at fans' house. At the end of the night, I'd say, "Hey, by the way, we're looking for a place to stay tonight." And fans would, "Oh, you can stay at my house. Stay at my house." And so we did. Sometimes it'd be South Central LA in a cold slab floor, or it would be in Houston, Texas. My dad's out of town, and we were in the oil business, and it'd be some giant house, So it was really cool. We were with the people who loved us the most. At the same time, DRI was changing over with an album called Crossover. So their fans were puzzled. They were like, "Crossover? Are you guys changing from being punk rock to something else?" And so they had their issues that they were going through, but they were broadening out to more metal people. So they did the smart thing, crossing over to more accessibility. It was all business. I learned a lot from Spike and Kurt, and I saw their work ethic, how hard they work, how smart they were, and you just learn from people like that, and you really respect them. They're still doing the same thing today.
Yeah.
They're still touring, man. Unbelievable.
Yeah, they're in Tampa in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They're going all over. What were the crowds like for that? Because, like I said, punks and metalheads never really crossed over at that time. It was still kind of like very separated.
Yeah, it was a challenge. Again, we had to go on stage and do what we do, and the chips fell where they were. But by that time, we had a following. So because we were there, it was bringing the metal crowd that wanted to see Nasty Savage because of the history that we were doing, the internet, not the internet, but the underground, the tape trading, the fanzines, Metal Blade, and then now we're in Rotten Records. So I think most people, when they see someone working hard and doing it passionately, they're going to respect that. If you're fake or you're a poser or phony, they're not going to respect that, and they're going to see that. Of course, there's always some narrow-minded people out there, but we made it through the whole tour and had a great time, man. It was really a learning process, and most people were open-minded enough to appreciate the hard work we were all doing. Again, I didn't have a lot of TV sets there on that tour either.
Yeah.
I think in the van we brought like 4 or 5, and they were gone pretty quick. I tried to reuse them and shit, but we just had to do what we had to do,
Fit cramming all those TVs in a van with probably like 10 people in it.
Well, what happened is DRI was so cool that they'd let us put all of our gear in their truck, and they would load and unload our gear for us. So I jammed it in with all the gear. They go, "What is that?" I go, "Well, I brought some TVs." And that's how that happened.
That's funny. 1990, Nasty Savage comes to an end for the original run. How did that happen?
We just got tired of being tired, and we're always arguing, and we're not going anywhere. It's like Adrian was our manager, but he really wasn't a outstanding rock and roll entertainment manager. He was Curtis's dad, who always tried his best, and he did. I mean, he inspired me in a lot of ways. I was inspired by him. He had the trucks with the who is John Galt and all this stuff. I don't know. He just, but we didn't know any better. We were all young and dumb, So we just got tired of going on tour and not getting paid properly or not coming back with money, and always arguing at our business meetings and shit. And we just said, screw it, man, we're done. And we just broke up. That was it. Later on, 20 years later or something, we went back to Europe, to Germany. I got a call from a promoter to do this to do this show. He was in my house because my office for Born to Ride is upstairs where I started Born to Ride. Before I had an office, I had one up here. And the guy was doing a story on hooligans on the highway, like young kids on sport bikes raising hell and killing themselves, and blood on the asphalt story about how bad and terrible these kids are. So I was standing up for him. I said, look, these are young kids. They're a lot of them are really smart. They just need an outlet, and they get a little crazy. Anyway, he was looking on the wall. He said, well, what is this? I go, I used to be in a heavy metal band, Nasty Savage. And a matter of fact, I just got a call. They want us to play again. We're putting the band back together. And the news guy goes, that's a hell of a story. It's human interest. Let's call, just like the old Brandon News guys. So they ended up following us around 5 different places. Our practice, they went each, Curtis driving a cab, Ben doing stuff.
Yeah.
And they did a big story on us. And it was actually 12 minutes long on the news. And it was getting the band back together. And actually, when I went the first time, I had footage. Oh, no, we went. I came back because it was a series. They didn't do it before we left. When they came back, I had video of the crowd and all this comments from people. They used all that in the story. So, man, you got to Google that because it really tells the whole story of what Nasty Savage was all about. It's really cool.
I think we actually watched that last night.
Oh, really? Wasn't that cool?
It's very awesome.
And I was filming. I was going, tell me what you think. And they're going, Nasty Savage.
You, after Nasty Savage, you went to pro wrestling. How did that come to be? Because I'm a huge pro wrestling fan, so I thought that was pretty awesome to hear.
Well, I was always a big wrestling fan, from way back when I moved to Florida and saw Dusty Rhodes become the American Dream and all that stuff, and was really inspired by that. And then I started running wrestling shows and things like that. But before that, I got Kevin Sullivan to be involved with Nasty Savage through Vandekar, and I got into wrestling that way. Started working with him in pro wrestling, got him to come to the Nasty Savage shows. So that kind of opened the door there. So anyway, I started running my own wrestling shows, and that's when a guy named Eddie Mansfield came to one of my shows and said, hey, I'm starting up a promotion at Universal Studios, Florida, and I want you to work with me. So I said, all right. And that's where I went there and became his right-hand man from working hard and bringing in talent, advertising, marketing, became his creative consultant. And I was also brought Nasty Ronnie into wrestling. And I had the Nasty organization and managed the Mongolian Stomper and the Possessor. And we'd film television at Universal, work with Beetlejuice and, the Bates Motel and shit. It was really cool. And I co-produced 200 episodes of the IWF Wrestling, worked with people like Blackjack Mulligan and Destruction, Demolition. I managed those guys. Greg Valentine, Rob Van Dam I brought in.
Nice.
A lot of different wrestlers I work with. Hercules, Hernandez, Dick Slater. I got all the bad guys too because I had the Nasty organization. I had the guy named the Possessor, and we had a great time, man. I was over. When you're over, you're on TV all the time, and it was really cool. I enjoyed every minute of it, and that's where I got a lot of my background for TV production and all that.
What's your personal wrestling Mount Rushmore?
That's a good question. I would have to say Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Stone Cold, and probably The Rock for me. Maybe those
Yeah.
guys. But there's a lot of great wrestlers that you think of who really made a difference in the wrestling business. Hulk Hogan for sure. Then Ric Flair for what he did and who his longevity. But Terry Funk, Dusty Rhodes should be up there too. Dusty Rhodes should be up there. Um, he inspired me more than anybody. He should probably be up there instead of The Rock for me, Dusty Rhodes. But my one of my favorites though is Vince McMahon, the body of work that he did. The WWE, WWF before that, and people would come in and try to hold him hostage. He'd say, "See ya," and then he'd just create another monster.
Yeah.
He's just amazing, Vince McMahon. I don't care what they say about him. Wrestling sucks right now without him.
Yep. I think probably me. I would say either probably Flair, Stone Cold, Dusty Rhodes, or Ricky Steamboat. I think that's interchangeable. And
Yeah.
Samoa Joe. He's a big one. I really dig.
What was the last one?
Samoa Joe.
Oh, Samoa Joe. Yeah.
Yeah, he did a lot of really great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, in the old days they had the territories, and then Vince McMahon bought them all out. But the territories was great because it was different places around America that had their own wrestling,
yeah,
and it was really cool to see that. I used to get wrestling magazines every week, every month. I have hundreds of them, but I used to collect them, all from the '60s, '70s, '80s, and I'd study them. I'd draw my own wrestling magazines. Even I used to do all that kind of stuff.
yeah. I love wrestling. Wrestling's awesome. Actually, going to
The ultimate storytelling. It's
it is.
really like when I was promoting wrestling. If I wanted to know how good the guys were doing out there in the ring, I didn't have to always go and watch them. All I had to do is listen to the crowd. And at the ending, if it happens the way it's happening there, you should hear the crowd pop. All through the matches. It's an art form, and a lot of these younger guys have no clue on what wrestling is about, and that's why it's changed so much. There's so many. Everybody's a wrestling promoter. Everybody's a wrestler. And back in the old days, man, it wasn't easy to get into the wrestling business at all.
No, it was still like taboo.
Oh yeah, it's like carny stuff, man.
Yeah. Jumping ahead a bit, we're probably gonna have to wrap this up here soon. Going on a bit long.
Yeah, my phone's about to die. Actually.
Yeah, we're gonna do one last one.
All right.
After a 20-year break, Nasty Savage released Jeopardy Room in 2024. Can you tell us how that happened and the current band lineup?
Well, after Penetration Point, we waited a while and we did one more album called Psycho Psycho, and that's the only album we didn't record at Morrisound. We did it at the Red Room in Tampa, but we came together because some guy offered us a bunch of money to do an album, and we all came together and wrote this record, recorded it, and not a lot of people even know about it. Called Psycho Psycho. It's hard to find, but I think it's a really killer stuff. And Richard did a lot more recording on that. And then that was it, man. That was it. And then all of a sudden, all these years later, we started playing more shows again. And we had a band going. And then David Austin left the band. And Scott Carino was our bass player, and he left. And then I'm like, damn, Pete, who do you have? And he came up with a guy, David Orman, another guitarist. And we got Kyle Sokol as a bass player. And I was talking to this guy, Frank, from FHM Records, who worked with Siren, big fan of Sirens and a big fan of Nasty Savage. And he said, hell, I'll do the album. And we got a little budget and we got some help from an angel investor to record at Morrisound. And, dude, it's unbelievably heavy album and everybody loves it. And we went right back into it and created this Jeopardy Room. I'm really proud of it and proud of the guys who wrote the music.
It's a great album. I really dig it. Yeah, so you recorded at Morrisound and you worked with Jim Morse again. How was that experience going through that?
It was all a blur really fast. I got Obituary to be on it, to do Witches Sabbath, which was amazing. How they support us, and
Yeah.
they were there for us. And it was just a really amazing process. And it happened so fast. And then we were playing Keep It True, the record release in Germany at the same time. And it's just amazing, man. It's like on my bucket list to not quit, to do another album. And it was exciting.
All right. One final thing to cast us away. What are you up to right now? And do you have any shows planned that are going on?
Well, we're actually booked not till September right now, playing the Tampa Death Fest. And then we're going to Switzerland to play in Switzerland in September as well. And I'm writing music. I'm writing some stuff. I've got a project going, possibly. I'm writing for with another guitarist. It's really good. And talking to Nasty Savage about doing another album.
Nice.
And that's kind of where we're at right now.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for taking an hour and 35 minutes of your time to do this. It's greatly appreciated. Yeah, I just want to say thank you.
Man, thank you guys, and I appreciate you having me on. And the stories you're telling is helping, provide that history lesson to people who don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Very important, man. Keep up the great work, guys. I love what you're doing.
All right.
I'm always here, and I'm always here for you too.
All right. Nice.
All right, guys.
See ya.
All right, bye.